Bienvenidos a todos a nuestro noveno webinario titulado Desarrollo, Emprendedor, el rol de las universidades. Un gusto saludar a todas las personas aquí presentes. Nos acompañan colegas de Estados Unidos, de la George Mason University y de Perú, de la Pontificia Universidad Católica de Perú. Este panel está encuadrado en la estrategia Fiesa Webinarios, estrategia sostenida por las Universidades Nacional de Cuyo y la Universidad Nacional de Mar del Plata, enmarcada en la Feria Internacional de Educación Superior Argentina 2021, que es coorganizada por el Consejo Interuniversitario Nacional con el apoyo de la Secretaría de Políticas Universitarias, el Consejo de Rectores de Universidades Privadas, la Asociación de Universidades del Grupo Montevideo y Global Observatory Obreal. Para este webinario también contamos con el apoyo de la Embajada de Estados Unidos en Argentina. A la vez contarles que este webinario articula con el proyecto Mujeres Emprendedoras Sociales financiado por el Fondo Fiduciario Pérez Guerrero de Naciones Unidas. Este proyecto tiene el objetivo de conocer las competencias emprendedoras sociales de mujeres universitarias y en territorio que participan de programas, proyectos y acciones de impacto social. El nodo coordinador de este proyecto es la Universidad Nacional de Mar del Plata e involucra 6 países latinoamericanos. Quisiera contarles un poquito cómo va a ser la dinámica de este webinario. Será moderado en 2 idiomas, español e inglés. Inicialmente serán presentados los 3 panelistas que nos acompañan. Las disertaciones que se hagan en inglés serán resumidas en español y las disertaciones en español serán resumidas en inglés. Para el momento de preguntas y respuestas de nuestro webinario, los invitamos a realizar sus preguntas vía chat en nuestro canal de YouTube, como hacemos habitualmente. Sí les solicitamos que indiquen a quién está dirigida la pregunta para facilitar con anticipación la traducción por parte de la moderadora en caso de ser necesaria. Sin más, voy a presentarles a nuestra moderadora, Susana Carrillo, nuestra moderadora de lujo, nacida en Perú, con una extensa trayectoria internacional, trabajando actualmente en la George Mason University. Por lo tanto, Susana de alguna forma representa muy bien a los países que nos acompañan hoy, por su origen y por su desempeño laboral. Les cuento un poquito más de ella. Es consultora internacional, cuenta con más de 15 años de experiencia profesional a nivel global, es directora de la Iniciativa para América Latina en el área de educación global de la George Mason University. Trabajó más de 20 años en el Banco Mundial en Washington, D.C., en el área de estrategia institucional, gerenciando programas y operaciones de reformas, proyectos multisectoriales. También trabajó en Naciones Unidas como jefe de programa, gerenciando portafolios de proyectos y equipos de especialistas internacionales. Su experiencia incluye temas como desarrollo social y económico, reformas de Estado, fortalecimiento institucional, educación internacional, facilitación y moderación de grupos de trabajo. Susana obtuvo su título de bachiller en Relaciones Internacionales y Estudios Latinoamericanos por la Universidad de George Mason, tiene una maestría en Desarrollo Social y Económico del Instituto de Altos Estudios Internacionales y de Desarrollo en Ginebra, Suiza, y una maestría en Desarrollo Internacional por la Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy de la Universidad de Boston. Se ha formado a nivel de posgrado también en Inglaterra, China, Brasil y Rusia. Es un gusto enorme saludarte, Susana. Bienvenida y adelante.
Buenos días a todos. Gracias, Yamila, por la presentación y gracias por invitarme. Para mí realmente es un placer poder moderar este evento con la calidad de participantes y presentadores que tenemos hoy día. Por cuestiones de tiempo y para respetar, voy a pasar rápidamente a presentar a nuestros panelistas de hoy día, que realmente es un lujo que contemos con estos panelistas. Empiezo por el profesor Samuel Fry, que es miembro de la Facultad de la Escuela de Estudios Integrados de George Mason University, donde dirige el programa Becarios sin fines de lucros y se desempeña como director del área de emprendimiento social en la Maestría de Estudios Interdisciplinarios. Samuel enseña cursos sobre organizaciones sin fines de lucro, liderazgo y estudios comunitarios. Con formación tanto en sociología como en administración pública, sus temas de investigación incluyen cómo las comunidades, las organizaciones y los gobiernos locales generan y gerencian y enfrentan el cambio social. Sam cuenta con más de 10 años de experiencia en el sector sin fines de lucro, diseñando, evaluando y mejorando programas y servicios. Su trabajo más reciente incluye un proyecto para identificar las oportunidades de colaboración entre la Universidad de George Mason y la Universidad Nacional de Mar del Plata para el desarrollo de un programa de estudios para emprendedores sociales emergentes. Brevemente voy a mencionar su bio en inglés porque también tenemos participantes en inglés. Samuel is a faculty member of the School of Integrative Studies, where he runs the Nonprofit Fellows Program and serves as Social Entrepreneurship Concentration Head for the Master of Arts in Interdisciplinary Studies degree. He also teaches courses in nonprofit leadership and community studies. With training in both sociology and public administration, he studies how communities, organizations, and local governments make sense of and navigate social change. Sam brings to his teaching and scholarship over 10 years of experience in the nonprofit sector, designing, evaluating, and improving programs and services. His most recent work includes a grant-funded project in which he is exploring opportunities for collaboration between George Mason University and the National University of Mar del Plata on the development of a short-term study abroad program for emerging social entrepreneurs. Voy a continuar con la presentación de la doctora Susan Howard, que también es profesora en George Mason University. Susan es una científica del comportamiento innovadora que enseña, asesora y crea en el nexo entre la academia, la industria y el espíritu empresarial. Combina teorías de las ciencias sociales y del comportamiento con las mejores prácticas en tecnologías de aprendizaje basadas en juegos, diseño centrado en el ser humano, design thinking, marketing social e innovaciones empresariales. El estilo de enseñanza de la doctora Howard involucra a los estudiantes en un enfoque de pensamiento sistémico para comprender el vínculo intrínseco entre los desafíos de salud, ambientales, sociales y económicos, y les proporciona un arsenal de herramientas para finalmente adoptar, defender o diseñar soluciones transformadoras en un individuo, campus, comunidad o a nivel global. Brevemente en inglés voy a mencionar el bios. Dr. Howard is Assistant Professor for the School of Integrative Studies, College of Humanities and Social Sciences at George Mason University. Susan Howard is a behavioral scientist, educator, and innovator who teaches, mentors, and creates at the nexus of academia, industry, and entrepreneurship. She combines theories from the behavioral and social sciences with best practices in game-based learning technologies, human-centered design, social marketing, and business innovations. Professor Howard's teaching style engages students in a systemic thinking approach to understand the intrinsic link between health, environment, social, and economic challenges, and provides them with an arsenal of tools to ultimately adopt, advocate for, or design transformative solutions at the individual, campus, community, or global level. Y finalmente tenemos al profesor Eduardo Ismodes de la Universidad Católica del Perú, la PUC. Eduardo es ingeniero mecánico, magíster en comunicaciones de la PUC y doctorado en historia latinoamericana y mundos indígenas. Es decano de la Facultad de Ciencias de Ingeniería de la PUC, es director de Relaciones Académicas de la FCI PUC, miembro de la Asamblea Universitaria, miembro de la Junta Directiva del Centro de Innovación y Desarrollo, CIDE PUC, director y fundador de la Red de Emprendedores EQIPU. Fue presidente de la Junta Directiva de CEDAPAL, miembro de la Comisión de Invenciones y Nuevas Tecnologías de Indecopi, es director ejecutivo del Consejo Nacional de Ciencia y Tecnología, fue director, CONCITEC en Perú, subdirector y miembro fundador del Grupo de Apoyo al Sector Rural, cofundador de la especialidad de Ingeniería Electrónica de la PUC y es autor de varios libros, entre ellos Países sin Futuros, Cambiando la Universidad en el Perú y libros técnicos sobre electricidad. Brevemente en inglés para nuestra audiencia anglosajona. Dr. Ismodes is a professor at the Catholic University of Peru in Lima. He's a mechanical engineer. He has a master's in communications and a PhD in Latin American history and indigenous worlds. He was a past dean of the School of Science and Engineer at the Catholic University. He was a director of academic relationships of the FCI PUC, Catholic University, member of the University Assembly, member of the Board of Directors of the Center for Innovation and Development, director and founder of eKipu. It's an entrepreneurs network in Lima. He was chairman of the board of the directors of CEDAPAL, which is a state company in Lima, member of the Commission of Inventions and New Technologies of Indecopi in Peru, executive director of the National Science and Technology Council, CONCITEC, in Peru, deputy director and founding member of the Rural Sector Support Group, co-founder of the specialty of electronic engineer at the Catholic University. He's an author of several books, including Countries Without a Future, Changing the University in Peru, and technical books about electricity. Thank you so much. So with that, I will give the floor to Samuel Fry to start with his presentation. Thank you. Welcome, Samuel. Can you unmute?
Yes, can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So thank you, Susanna, for the introduction, and thank you to the National University of Mar del Plata, as well as the National Inter-University Council for the invitation to speak today. So I first met Jamila. I had the pleasure of meeting her last September on her visit to Washington, D.C., which is really just a short drive from George Mason University in Fairfax. And I had looked forward to presenting with her at Fiesa 2020, along with Susanna, on the topic of social entrepreneurship study abroad. And I was excited too to visit Mar del Plata, which I've heard is a beautiful city. Unfortunately, the public health had had other plans for us. Nevertheless, I'm excited to be here with you today. So I designed my talk really around three core questions. So the first of which is just a little definitional in nature. So what is a social entrepreneur, and what role do they play in helping people acquire valued goods? So I'm going to use an example of a value good today throughout my talk, the example of housing. The second question then is, what competencies does an entrepreneur need to be successful? So for competencies, I'm referring to those knowledge, skills, abilities, attributes, attitudes, behaviors even that makes one successful in anything that they choose to do. And then third, how can universities help emerging entrepreneurs develop or refine these competencies? So just a little disclosure, I myself am not an entrepreneur, but I do educate entrepreneurs, so a group of graduate students each year. And so that's really my position that I speak to you from today. So let's talk just a little bit about kind of what social entrepreneurship is and how it differs from traditional entrepreneurs. So the field of social entrepreneurship has continued to grow in the last 20, 30 years, and it has really emerged from really the sort of convergence of two sectors, so the for-profit world and the nonprofit world. And so just like other concepts that scholars study, such as leadership or community, for example, there's not necessarily an agreed upon definition of what a social entrepreneur is, but practitioners and theorists alike generally agree that social entrepreneurs are people who imagine and create sort of creative yet practical and sustainable solutions to social problems. And so this sort of focus on creating social value is one of the key distinctions between a social entrepreneur and a traditional entrepreneur. And so if you think about a social entrepreneur's approach to tackling social problems, it really depends upon the sector in which they work. So take housing. So I mentioned housing as an example. So in a capitalist economy, much like the United States, people compete in the private market, and then those with the most money essentially win, right? They have access to the best and highest quality housing. Now, for folks who can't afford decent housing, the government may step in and provide subsidies subsidies for building owners or for property managers And so, or they may even build and manage their own public housing projects. Now, when the government's initiatives fail, either because of bureaucratic inefficiencies, or sometimes the shifting political trade winds when you move from one administration to the next, different ideologies of public policy and social welfare policy, and different levels of support as well. So when those efforts fail, nonprofits may step in through donations and grants and serve as kind of what's referred to as gap fillers. So when the market and the public sectors fail. Now, the boundaries between these sectors, and you can see kind of in my Venn diagram there, have really become increasingly blurred, and not just for social entrepreneurs, but for other folks working in other sectors as well. And so this blurring really means that it's not just that nonprofits are being shaped and becoming more business-like, which they absolutely are, and it's not that government is being shaped by nonprofits. There's this sort of what's called multi-directional impact. So businesses, for example, are under increasing pressure to be more socially responsible, right? I'm sure many of you have heard the term corporate social responsibility. And so this kind of multi-sector work in which a social entrepreneur finds him or herself is another key differentiation between an entrepreneur and a social entrepreneur. So carrying through this example of housing, so somebody that works in the housing sector, so they may, they're tasked with finding materials and labor that are high quality at low cost so that they can provide affordable housing. But they also work within the confines of a nation's, housing policies and ordinances, building codes at both the national and local level. So you see before you, this is a picture of a home that was built in Cambodia. So in Cambodia, where 80% of the population lives in rural areas, homes are typically constructed of timber, so which really doesn't make a whole lot of sense given that the climate there experiences a rainy season, that typically lasts 6 months or longer. And so the material, the timber, is susceptible to rot. And as a consequence, homes there typically only last about 10 years. So as an example of an entrepreneur, so Mekong Homes, which is a collaboration between local builders and manufacturers, they construct high quality, affordable homes made from prefabricated materials. And one of the key distinctions here is that they not only source them locally, but which are a better fit then for the country's climate, but they also help to strengthen the capacity of the community by working with community members, so local builders and local banks on microfinance and working with nonprofit organizations as well. And so this connection to local communities is yet just another example of how social entrepreneurs are a little bit different from traditional entrepreneurs who tend to work primarily in the private market. Now, what makes, leads me to my next question here is what makes an enterprise like Mekong Homes and its employees, and just folks in general who are sort of budding entrepreneurs, what are the competencies that make them able to navigate this complex multi-sector environment? And so various international organizations, right? So the OECD, European Commission, United Nations have constructed various lists of what they see as the core competencies for social entrepreneurs in order to be successful. And I have before you here just a couple of examples of these competencies. And so these lists, while there are some differences between the lists, there is widely general agreements here that traits and attributes like being creative and being persistent, being able to cope with risk, spotting opportunities, having an insight into the market, whatever you work in. So for example, if you work in housing, having some sort of insight into that. And so these are sort of what we think makes, folks successful entrepreneurs. Now, again, I mentioned that I'm speaking to you not as an entrepreneur, but as an educator. And as such, I ask the role that universities play in helping students acquire or refine these competencies if they already have them. And so just for a little bit of background context before I suggest an answer to that question. So much like the growth in the field, academic programs that train and educate entrepreneurs have continued to grow over the years, particularly in the United States. And so the desired learning outcomes of these programs, and it doesn't matter if it's in a business field or in social sciences, which is where I and my colleague Susan teach at the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. So no matter the department, the sort of competencies generally include knowledge building and the more practical experience of creating social ventures. Now, unfortunately, the former still dominates many of these programs. And so this gap between theory and practice that is so prevalent in applied, many applied fields as well, in addition to social entrepreneurship, this really presents a unique opportunity and challenge for educators trying to bridge this gap. And so with experiential learning pedagogies, things like internships, inviting speakers in the field who are experts in that area, site visits, service learning, study abroad programs, which Susanna mentioned to you, that's something that I hope to create with my friend and colleague Jamila. And so this sort of shift that we want to sort of shift to is moving from this knowledge building, which absolutely is essential. It's not that we want to completely take away, from educating students about the principles and practices, but move more towards helping them develop some of these competencies so that they can actually be entrepreneurs. So shifting from educating students about entrepreneur principles to educating them for social entrepreneurship. And so just some challenges and takeaways and really unique opportunities presented by this. So the first is that, among the competencies that I described, market insight and persistence are the only competencies that, as far as in the lecture or in the literature so far, are seen to have predictive value. So in other words, from the time that you interview a budding entrepreneur in 3 to 5 years, these are the two competencies that most likely predict whether they will be an entrepreneur at all. The second challenge is, how do you teach a personality trait like persistence, particularly when you don't, get the student until they are, an adult, until they're 18, or in my case, 24 or older. And particularly when you interview students and survey them, many of them report that some of these traits like creativity and persistence really can't be taught. They have to be learned at home. And while it's a value and a trait that has to be instilled at an early age. And so that is one of the recommendations from the OECD, is promoting these attributes early, often, and at all levels of education. Right, so that presents, again, an interesting challenge and opportunity for educators to increase and strengthen outreach efforts. So, connecting with communities, connecting with community colleges, with high schools, with vocational schools, so that you can start to instill some of these traits and attributes and help them develop them at an early age. That way, when they get into the university level, they're already sort of primed to, be a successful entrepreneur. And then finally here, these sort of these gaps in our understanding of how competencies are learned, and thinking about like what impacts an emerging entrepreneur's career trajectory present again another opportunity for further investigation. And so Jamila and her team at UNMDP have already begun this investigation, and they graciously invited me to join their research, which I was very happy about. And so in this study, we asked a sample of students at both of our universities really 3 questions. So 1, what characteristics do students believe they need to be successful entrepreneurs? And 2, so what are the contexts in which they might use these characteristics they identified? So, in which situations, how would they use them? And then finally, how does the university support the development of these characteristics? And more importantly, how can they in the future support the development of these characteristics? And so we're really excited to soon present the analysis, and in particular a cross-cultural comparison of our results. And we really believe this will be important because, I mentioned markets. So as markets continue to expand, global social problems increasingly become global in nature, and thus they require really global solutions, and that requires collaboration. And what better way to collaborate than between universities, different countries, and in different continents. So with that said, I very appreciate your time. I thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, I have my contact information up here in my email. I would be happy to take any of your questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Samuel, for the excellent presentation. You highlighted very important points, and I know that the majority of our audience is from Latin America, which apply in a very succinct and realistic way to the reality that our countries in the region are facing. But as you said, these are issues that require knowledge sharing and global solutions. So this is a great opportunity for us to learn what is happening in other countries and how other universities are addressing the issue. I am going to summarize very briefly in Spanish because I think that there are very important points to highlight. I'm turning on to Spanish. Samuel presentó lo que para él es un emprendedor social. Las preguntas claves es, ¿qué es un emprendedor social? ¿Qué tipo de conocimientos y competencias deben de tener los emprendedores? Y cómo estas personas piensan y producen productos que van a mejorar la calidad de vida de las sociedades y las personas. En realidad, Samuel mencionó también que no hay una definición, digamos, que sea única sobre lo que es un emprendedor social, pero él los ve como personas que imaginan, desarrollan soluciones que tienen un impacto social para resolver problemas sociales emergentes. También mencionó que hay una diferencia clara entre los emprendedores sociales y los emprendedores que tienen un punto de vista más capitalista y más focalizado en generar ganancias. Habló también del contexto, que es, digamos, cómo se solucionan las necesidades y cómo se cumplen las necesidades sociales de las personas, cómo los gobiernos actúan, el sector privado actúan, y normalmente las ONGs llenan espacios que no llenan ni el sector privado ni el gobierno. Actualmente los negocios, la tendencia es que los negocios privados tienen más presión para convertirse en más responsables socialmente, pero no siempre esto se cumple. Y eso es un aspecto importante que los emprendedores sociales van a llenar en algún momento. Samuel dio un ejemplo bastante interesante del sector de construcción de casas en Camboya, donde 80% de la población vive en áreas rurales. Las casas son de madera y como tienen muchas lluvias, aproximadamente duran un periodo de 10 años, lo cual no es sostenible. Y hay una firma de emprendedores sociales que se llama Mekong Homes, Mekong Casas, que ha desarrollado un producto más adaptado a la realidad local, usando materiales locales. Y estas casas tienen una duración de mucho más años y son más relevantes. Pero también mencionó un aspecto que es importante, que esta firma trabaja con las comunidades, entiende a las comunidades, entiende las necesidades de las personas y ha desarrollado un producto que está adaptado a la realidad social y económica de las poblaciones locales. En cuanto a competencias de los emprendedores, él mencionó que hay muchas instituciones que han hecho una lista de cuáles son estas competencias, que son básicamente ser creativo, ser persistente, tener la capacidad de lidiar con riesgos y tener un conocimiento amplio y profundo de los mercados. También Samuel habló sobre el papel de las universidades y cómo se crean los conocimientos y cómo se crea una experiencia para construir emprendedores sociales. Lamentablemente, Samuel mencionó que lamentablemente las universidades todavía tienen una perspectiva un poco tradicional y se focalizan en enseñar la teoría, pero falta mucho en términos de dar acceso a los estudiantes a la práctica. Cómo ir al campo, cómo conocer el campo, cómo conectarse con las comunidades y tener una experiencia más práctica, que es lo que falta. Eso falta mucho todavía. Y conocer las realidades locales, no solo en teoría, sino en la práctica. Como retos, Samuel ve cómo desarrollar esta capacidad para los estudiantes y para los jóvenes para poder convertirse en emprendedores sociales, cómo conocer, tener todas las cualidades para conocer bien los mercados y cómo desarrollar una personalidad de persistencia. También habló de que los estudios de psicología muestran que la persistencia no se enseña y no se aprende en un salón de clase, sino es una característica que tiene que ser enseñada a las personas desde niños y es algo que se aprende en la casa. Bueno, entonces todavía hay muchos vacíos en cómo enseñar y aprender competencias para ser emprendedores. Es un proceso una enseñanza que está en proceso, pero que por ejemplo, el proyecto que él está desarrollando con la Universidad de Mar del Plata es un buen ejemplo de cómo la colaboración entre diferentes países es positiva y hay que seguir insistiendo en esto porque muchas de las soluciones se pueden compartir a través de compartir el conocimiento. Bueno, lo dejo ahí porque tenemos otros dos presentadores y no quiero ocupar más tiempo. Entonces pasamos a la doctora Howard. Susan, if you can please come in. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you so much, Susana. Thank you, Jamila. And I especially want to thank Dr. Samuel Fry for the introduction to this amazing group and team. And I want to thank the audience for participating this morning. I find it really very serendipitous the way that the presenters are organized. Dr. Fry talked about what an entrepreneur is, particularly what a social entrepreneur is. And I think it's natural that I follow because I am an entrepreneur, and I am an entrepreneur that develops interventions for social impact. So my presentation today talks about the synergies between entrepreneurs, academia, and the private sector to create social impact. And I'm going to ask my colleague, Jeanette, to begin screen sharing. While we're getting that started, why don't I continue? One of the questions that Samuel asked was, what are the elements that contribute to creating competencies at a university and among students? And I would add that one of the ways to create competencies and encourage social entrepreneurship is to actually encourage social entrepreneurship among faculty. As those of you who work as faculty, we are rewarded for publishing in papers, and we're not rewarded for patents and companies started. So that would be my first recommendation in follow-up to Dr. Fry's presentation. So as I mentioned, I straddle academia and entrepreneurship, and the firm that I founded 25 years ago is called Howard Delafield International. And George Mason University does enable me to continue to run the firm. And one of the ways that I'm going to share with you how synergies have happened with universities is because of their encouragement of my own ability to foster my entrepreneurship. So Howard Delafield International is a women-owned firm. Howard is myself, Susan Howard, and Sylvia Delafield is my business partner. We formed 25 years ago. So Dr. Fry, yes, perseverance is absolutely necessary for entrepreneurship. And we combine innovation, again, Dr. Fry said creativity, and I would include innovation, creativity, but we combine it with rigor to create the desired social impact. And the way we do that is through our affiliations, through our partnerships, through our synergies with the university, George Mason particularly. I am in the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, an integrative department called the School of Integrative Studies. We also partner with the department in the College of Visual and Performing Arts, as well as the College of Science and the Virginia Serious Game Institute, which I'll talk about in this presentation today. And the way I've structured this presentation is to talk about the human-centered design approach that we've employed in designing a case study that I'm going to share with you. I want to emphasize that this case study is in progress. It's a consortium called the Game of Choice, Not Chance, funded by the U.S. Agency for International Development. And one of the things that I hope you'll gain from this presentation is when we follow the human-centered design process, when we start with the challenge, then partnerships naturally evolve rather than coming with the partners and coming with a solution. So here's a video that gives you a 2.5-minute snapshot of what this consortium and our project is all about. So I'm going to ask Jamila to please show the video. Thank you so much. As you all could see, this video and this project shows an intervention in India among adolescent girls 15 to 19 in low to middle socioeconomic levels. And I hope that you will see some application from the country that you're working in. And I can certainly see application in my own country, in the US. What I want to do in the next several minutes is talk about how we form these synergies, these intersectoral synergies between academia, entrepreneurs, the private sector, and how we use the design thinking process to do so. Dr. Fry talked about the different elements of creativity and innovation. And what I would add to that is simply asking the questions, what if, or what else? And I think that really leads to innovation and creativity. And then that innovation really then perpetuates perseverance, because if you're so excited about something you've identified or question that needs to be answered in a new way, then you have the perseverance to see it through. So we asked the question after 25 years of working in the behavioral science field and in developing interventions, we asked what if direct access to information products and services could be delivered directly to the consumer, in this case, adolescent girls 15 to 19, through their mobile phones. And then we wondered, well, what if there's a way for girls to have agency over their future by experiencing the outcome of their choices in a mobile game? So those are the driving questions that led us to ask these questions, and the driving questions that led us to wonder the potential of leveraging mobile technology that's transforming her world, and we wanted to leverage it to transform her life. As you saw in the video, the challenge that was identified, and again, design thinking always begins with a challenge. It doesn't begin with an idea or solution. It always begins with a challenge. The challenge here is, how do we address early marriage and pregnancy among adolescent girls? How do we address confidence among girls to negotiate not only relationships in an intimate partner, but also in a family and within the society and within the community? How do we make reproductive health resources available, but not only reproductive health resources, but other resources like career and skill building and safety resources? So this is the challenge that set us on our pursuit of a solution. And as shared in the video, the intervention is called the Game of Choice, Not Chance, and it's actually a suite of games. We're building a game also for adolescent boys. And again, this is all through funding from USAID. And this, by the way, is initiated by my firm, Howard Delafield International. So we're the entrepreneurs, but again, we're straddling academia and also private sector, which I'll talk about. And so we're using the Game of Choice, Not Chance platform as a way to leverage mobile technology, to empower adolescents to become active decision makers in their own lives. So I want to share with you how we engaged partners in the next part of this presentation. So as we shared, the girls learned through role play how their choices matter. Well, the first thing we needed to understand was, what are their choices? What are the challenges that they have in their daily life? And to do that, we identified a research firm. This firm is called Girl Effect, and they're based in London, but they also have offices all over the world, including Mumbai and Delhi. And they also have a network called the Technology Enabled Girl Ambassadors that actually are girls working with other girls, doing research to find out their wants, needs, desires, and aspirations. As opposed to a university researcher and officials and professionals going into a community asking girls 15 to 19, this is peer-to-peer. And so some of the key findings that we uncovered were their conflicts. I'm not going to go through this list. I just want to show you that in a game, there is always a conflict, and you have to make a decision. So what we found here were, well, what were the conflicts? So on the one hand, for instance, she should be submissive and obedient. That's expected of her family. It's expected of society, but she wants greater control over her life. So within the game, we developed a storyline which shows these different pulls and pushes and pulls that are based on real life. One of the things we found out that we needed to do was to go deeper into each of these psychographic findings. And to do so, we needed to identify a co-design partner. And the co-design partner that we identified is a company called Vihara Innovation Network. And Vihara Innovation Network is based in Delhi. Again, Dr. Fry talked about the importance of engaging with the community. And in our case, we also feel the importance of engaging with other businesses, but locally owned and operated businesses. So we identified Vihara Innovation Network based in Delhi, in India, and they helped us do a deep dive into understanding not just the dreams, aspirations, and desires of the girls, but also the efforts towards her dreams. What is her home environment like? What is the role of the mother? What is the role of the father? What are the barriers or enablers towards her dreams? And again, this is also part of the design thinking process, and doing a journey map and understanding and mind mapping and understanding her real life. So this informed our game development. And one of the things I want to point out here is that you'll see that some of the things that she identified were in fact security issues and career aspirations. So moving on, Also, drawing on the expertise that's available in India, we hired a game development partner based in Mumbai, India, called Indusgeeks. They also have an office in San Jose, California, but they are Indian managed and operated. And of course, they have the cultural understanding of girls in India. And as you see here, this is a choice-based architecture in the back end of the game. So you see there are choices, and girls get to make a choice. And based on the choice she makes, the game and the storyline branches. And we measure things like confidence, relationships, and health, and their win-loss states that I won't go into for the purpose of this presentation. But I just want to show how by using a design thinking approach, we naturally identified partners and we brought them on and engaged them. If you remember, the second what if question was, can we connect girls to real world resources to make them equipped to make decisions that impact their health, safety, career, and educational outcomes? So what we did then was identify a suite of partners, again, to help us create in-game linkages. So if, for instance, she needs to negotiate with a potential intimate partner and she needs to be aware of whether she's fertile or not, we direct her to a Cycle Beads fertility app. This is an app created by Cycle Technologies. It's a way for girls to track their fertility. We've also partnered with Mina Foundation. They are providing our players with access to low-cost sanitary napkins. All of these links in the game can be stored in a virtual backpack. The players can go back to the backpack at any time of the game and also at the end of the game and directly link to these products and services, which again was one of our original what if questions. All of this led to another interesting partnership with George Mason University, and that's to design and develop a job simulator. As you recall from the research, the co-design research, girls wanted careers, but they weren't sure how to attain their careers. They didn't have an understanding of what skills were needed for those careers. So we are working with George Mason University, the College of Visual and Performing Arts, an incubator firm housed within the Virginia Serious Game Institute, to develop a job simulator that takes a player through a day in the life of being a teacher, a nurse, and other professions that were actually identified through research, again, through Girl Effect. So this leads me to the last partnership that I want to talk about, and that's measurement. So again, as we developed this response to what the girls said they wanted, and we created this backpack mechanism, we also wondered, well, what if we could make correlations between what the girls put in their backpack and the choices that girls make in the game with real life behavior? And we identified a partner, again, at George Mason University and the College of Science to do predictive analytics, to do some really novel measures, the way that Netflix uses artificial intelligence to make predictions for you. And our hope is to be able to provide feedback to the girl. We're still working all of this out because obviously there are a lot of privacy issues and concerns. So we're still trying to work that out. We also identified FHI 360, who's our impact evaluation partner. So finally, and to sum up, so I realize I'm over time, I wanted to show that how through the design thinking process, we were able to bring in academia, entrepreneurs who really led this initiative, private sector partners through in-game linkages. We identified game design and development firms. Of course, we engaged research firms, and finally, predictive game analytics entities. And again, a combination of George Mason University, the private sector, and entrepreneurs. So I want to thank you all very much. Muchas gracias. And I look forward to answering any questions during the question and answer, and also hearing from you either through my business email or through my university email. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Howard, for the excellent presentation. It's very, very relevant for the topic that we are discussing. And giving the example of what your firm is doing in India, it's very, very, appealing to, I imagine, to the audience, because it's a key issue for Indian society and for the development of Indian society. I had the, I'm not going to take too much time, but I had the opportunity to experience that on the ground in Jaipur. And I think this is an excellent initiative that you are leading, especially to connect the universities with reality on the ground. So I'm going to pass on to Spanish to move on and to briefly summarize what you presented. Entonces, la doctora Howard presentó, empezó por las preguntas y para complementar lo que el doctor Samuel Fry había ya mencionado, cuáles son los elementos que contribuyen para crear competencias. Y uno de los elementos que ella mencionó, adicionalmente a lo que ya el doctor Fry había mencionado, es cómo las universidades apoyan digamos, a crear esta mentalidad de emprendedores. Y un punto importante que ella mencionó es cómo, digamos, apoyar a los profesores, no solamente a que publiquen, porque normalmente los profesores, digamos, se vuelven más conocidos y tienen mejor reputación y suben en la escala en las universidades cuando más publicaciones tienen. Pero ella sugiere que también les den la oportunidad de que los profesores sean emprendedores ellos mismos, así aprenden en la práctica y pueden transferir esos conocimientos a sus estudiantes. Y es lo que ella hace en la actualidad con su propia empresa y con la Universidad de George Mason. Ella tiene una firma, una empresa que es formada por mujeres emprendedoras. Y en esta firma ella combina la innovación, la creación y el rigor para crear rigor y productos de calidad. Un punto importante que ella mencionó es que es importante focalizarse en el nivel, concentrarse en el nivel y en el rigor de las asociaciones e iniciativas conjuntas que se puedan crear para solucionar problemas sociales. Ella mencionó que usó su empresa y la Universidad de George Mason trabajando en colaboración la metodología de design thinking, y eso es diseño basado en el ser humano. O sea, enfocarse en cuáles son las necesidades del ser humano para diseñar productos adecuados y no al revés. No crear productos adecuados y convencer al consumidor, sino mirar lo que el consumidor necesita, mirar cuáles son los problemas sociales. La iniciativa que ella está liderando a través de su empresa se llama el Juego de Cambio, y que se desarrolla en India, en las zonas rurales de India, y se focaliza en cambiar la mentalidad y darles instrumentos a niñas de zonas rurales en India, de un nivel económico, socioeconómico bajo, niñas entre 15 y 19 años, para que ellas puedan tomar sus propias decisiones y puedan abrir sus oportunidades a las enseñanzas tradicionales en la sociedad de India, que se focalizan en que la niña llega a los 15 años y se casa y tiene hijos y pierden la oportunidad de estudiar, de ir a la universidad y de construir su propia identidad, porque generalmente ellas son controladas por los padres y por la sociedad. Entonces, a través de este instrumento, de esta aplicación que ha creado con su empresa, las niñas tienen acceso a información directa, y esta información y esta dinámica de juegos que se encuentra en la aplicación ayuda a que las niñas desarrollen su autoestima y puedan tomar sus propias decisiones. Todo esto se ha hecho a través del proceso de design thinking. También es importante mencionar que ella valora bastante este proceso de design thinking y para identificar cuáles son las mejores asociaciones a nivel institucional. O sea, encontrar soluciones y productos para ese tipo de problemas no se puede hacer por una sola institución, sino establecer alianzas críticas que tengan impacto, o sea, que se complementen entre ellas. Y igualmente ahora, en colaboración con la Universidad de George Mason, están ya entrando en el ambiente de identificar mejores sinergias intersectoriales y alianzas, y también utilizar inteligencia lo que se dice en inglés predictive analytics, o sea, cómo se predicen los comportamientos para poder diseñar mejores productos. Bueno, entonces, sin más comentarios, voy a darle la palabra al profesor Eduardo, que nos va a presentar el caso de Perú, su experiencia en Perú. Gracias. Eduardo, ¿puedes?
Sí, estoy conectando la pantalla.
Perfecto, gracias.
¿Se ve bien?
Sí, se ve perfecto.
Bien. Buenos días con todos ustedes. Es un gusto saludarles, agradecer a Fiesa, a la Universidad Mar del Plata, esta invitación y el agradecimiento también por poder compartir con distinguidos profesores de la George Mason University este encuentro. El tema del que voy a tratar es sobre la universidad. Mis padres eran profesores universitarios. Desde chico yo vivía lo que era la universidad. Acabé ingeniería mecánica y no me gustaba trabajar en el sector empresarial. No me atraía. Trabajar para que otro haga dinero no era mi tema. Y la universidad sí era un atractivo grande para mí y conseguí ingresar y ser profesor en la universidad, porque creía que la universidad era un instrumento, un motor de cambio para mejor para la sociedad. Pero dentro fui viendo que en realidad no sucedía esto, que la universidad no era el motor de cambio. La universidad en el Perú tenía un potencial, tiene un potencial para hacerlo, pero no lo está haciendo. Y de esto quiero tratar el día de hoy. Principalmente, fundamentalmente, el tema de foco es el desarrollo humano. ¿Qué es el desarrollo humano? Queremos que en nuestros países haya buena salud, alta esperanza de vida, buena alimentación, buena educación, que haya democracia y que podamos participar en la vida social, en la vida económica del país. Pero esto, ¿cómo se consigue? Si seguimos esta línea, vemos que para el desarrollo humano necesitamos recursos y necesitamos adelantos en el conocimiento. Estos recursos se consiguen cuando la gente tiene un buen salario, cuando la empresa y la gente paga impuestos y otros recursos más. Pero esos recursos a su vez se consiguen cuando hay crecimiento económico y desarrollo social. Es decir, cuando a las empresas les va bien y que les vaya bien a las empresas se va distribuyendo por toda la sociedad. Pero ese crecimiento económico, para conseguirlo, debe ir acompañado de productividad, competitividad en las empresas y en la sociedad. Y además debe haber cambio tecnológico e innovación. ¿Cómo conseguimos que haya cambio tecnológico y adelantos en el conocimiento? Hay una raíz común para ambas cosas. Nos conseguimos cambio tecnológico y adelantos cuando hay gente que inventa, cuando hay gente que crea nuevas cosas, cuando hay gente que emprende. Y no solo cuando hay gente, sino además cuando hay recursos. Si combinamos gente y recursos, podemos generar cambio tecnológico, podemos generar innovación. Esto se convierte en productividad, crecimiento, recursos y desarrollo humano. Y por supuesto, ese cambio tecnológico también genera adelantos en el conocimiento. Pero lo que les puse a la izquierda, en amarillo, es lo que crea un poco país, o lo que crea un país. También podemos conseguir cambio tecnológico comprando ese conocimiento, comprando tecnología. Y está bien, a través de lo que inventan en otros países, pues conseguimos producir productividad, competitividad. Y por supuesto, contribuimos al desarrollo humano de otros países. Esta es una situación ideal, donde nosotros creamos, también vendemos a otros países y le compramos a otros países conocimiento. Pero, ¿cuál es la situación en países como el Perú? Que no estamos creando conocimiento. Todo lo compramos. Y claro, nos ayuda un poco, pero el comprar eso nos genera gastos. Parte importante de nuestros recursos se van para el desarrollo humano de gente de otros países. Lo que no está mal. Lo que está mal es que nosotros no seamos capaces de crear nuestro propio conocimiento. Y acá es donde viene el papel de las universidades. Las universidades son clave para formar a esas personas que pueden cambiar un país, que puedan formar líderes, creadores, investigadores, innovadores, etc. Pero estamos en un círculo cerrado, en un círculo vicioso, porque la universidad en el Perú tiene reglas, formas de ser, culturas que difícilmente cambian. Como en la universidad no hay procedimientos que incentiven a cambiar, como el profesor normalmente es un empleado, no es un emprendedor, normalmente en el Perú, no es un ejemplo de líder, de investigador, de innovador. Y los alumnos son formados por ese profesor. ¿Qué resulta? Un egresado que no está formado en competencias que lo incentivan a ser un líder, un creador, un investigador. Consecuencia final, el egresado no será un gran factor de cambio y transformación del país. Consecuencia, el país no tendrá creación propia de conocimiento. Peor, ese egresado en algunos casos va a enseñar a los colegios, a las escuelas, y mantiene el sistema, o va a enseñar a la universidad y mantiene el sistema. Por esto estamos en una suerte de círculo vicioso. Estamos en una situación poco conveniente en el Perú. Y claro, para entenderlo esto, hay que ver cómo se forma la universidad en el Perú y compararla con la universidad en Estados Unidos. La universidad en el Perú y en Latinoamérica en general fue creada para mantener el sistema, con alta intervención del poder estatal o del poder religioso, con preponderancia en lo teórico y poca base práctica, y ubicadas muy cerca del poder central. Las universidades en los Estados Unidos, fundadas 150 años después, en el último tercio del siglo XIX, se convirtieron en unidades que estaban orientadas a servir a las necesidades de la población local, que combinaba muy bien la investigación con teoría y práctica, con alta competencia y con alto nivel de libertad que no tuvieron las universidades en Latinoamérica. Entonces, ¿cómo romper ese círculo vicioso? ¿Cómo convertir a la universidad en una universidad transformadora que contribuya a que un país genere conocimiento propio? Para romperlo hay que ir a lo más rico y lo más valioso de las universidades, que son los estudiantes. En los estudiantes está la energía potencial, esa energía potencial que debe ser transformada por los profesores, por toda la universidad, en soluciones para la sociedad. De eso se trata. Se trata de impulsar el trabajo en equipo, la inter y la multidisciplinaridad, y de profesores y un sistema que está dedicado a formar en conocimientos, incorporar el tema de competencias y habilidades blandas. Y para ello tenemos que trabajar conociendo que este tema no está bien desarrollado. Y para eso, ¿qué hay que usar? En toda institución hay espacios formales de aprendizaje y hay espacios no formales. Los espacios informales son tan importantes como los formales. Si se combinan, podemos conseguir un estudiante formado en conocimientos, competencias y habilidades blandas. En nuestra universidad, en la Universidad Católica, estamos trabajando en esta dirección con otras universidades en el Perú y una en Colombia. Tenemos una iniciativa que se denomina Equipo, desde la cual se incentiva a los estudiantes a formar equipos en lo que les interese, en lo que les guste, y que dediquen parte de su tiempo universitario a ello. Tenemos una plataforma, una red social, y realizamos actividades regulares que incentivan el trabajo en equipo, cosas que ha mencionado Sam y Susan, las impulsamos desde estos espacios, e invitamos a otras universidades a ser parte de esta red, con miras a hacer un movimiento del Perú y, si es posible, de toda América Latina. Desde Kipu hacemos toda una serie de actividades. Tenemos cerca de 33.000 emprendedores y 2.100 equipos. Pero hay equipos de toda la área. Hay de buenas características, de malas características, algunos se reúnen y no duran. Y tenemos algunas actividades como el reto de la innovación, el laboratorio de emprendimiento, el desafío de un mes, actividades de preincubación, tenemos actividades en radio, hacemos ferias, un encuentro anual, etcétera. Y poco a poco vamos sumando más universidades que participan en este sistema, donde se incentivan sus universidades a formar equipos. De todas estas actividades, hemos visto lo importante que es no solo tener una plataforma y que la gente la use como quiera, sino que hay que poner incentivadores. Y nuestras dos grandes iniciativas son el reto de la innovación y el laboratorio de emprendimientos. En el reto de la innovación ponemos retos, los estudiantes se inscriben individualmente y nosotros, desde nuestra red y con la ayuda de nuestras universidades socias, formamos los equipos. En el laboratorio recibimos ya a equipos formados que quieren generar un emprendimiento hacia una empresa o hacia una actividad social. Y nosotros, tanto en Innovation Challenge como en el laboratorio, les damos herramientas para conseguir tener éxito en dar soluciones a los retos. Este año, por ejemplo, en el Innovation Challenge hemos tenido 1.770 inscritos, 187 proyectos. Hemos tenido 13 horas de capacitación, 3.380 horas de video reproducida, 75 mentores, y en cada universidad repiten la metodología. O sea, desde equipo no manejamos todo, repartimos las características del reto y cada universidad socia se encarga de escoger a sus ganadores. Y estos retos los conseguimos desde el Estado o desde ONGs y que responden a necesidades que hay en el país. Una universidad colombiana se ha sumado a nuestro sistema, que es la Universidad Antonio Nariño, una universidad con bastante llegada en todo Colombia. Y el Laboratorio de Emprendimientos es una iniciativa en la cual invitamos a los equipos, como dije, ya formados o por formarse, que tienen una iniciativa. Igualmente, año a año vamos creciendo. De 194 participantes que tuvimos, el año pasado tuvimos 1.100, y este año, como en Reto de la Innovación, esperamos tener 1.800 participantes. Gracias a esta actividad, donde hacemos semillero, desarrollo, evolución, nosotros estamos apuntando a transformar a la universidad, usando espacios no formales que con el tiempo deben unirse a los espacios formales. En los espacios formales, el profesor normal enseña conocimientos. Desde nuestras actividades en equipo, lo formamos en competencias, en habilidades blandas. Y la idea de final es ¿cuál? Que estos egresados contribuyan a atacar los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, sea porque crean empresas que generan valor, sea porque atacan problemas importantes de la sociedad. Y nos basamos en ideas como las de Ken Robinson, las de Robert Waldinger, de Tal Ben Shahar y tantos otros expertos que hablan sobre cómo podemos nosotros tratar de tener una vida con sentido, una vida en donde el ser feliz no sea un momento permanente, sino que lo consigamos porque estamos haciendo cosas valiosas, cosas importantes que benefician a la sociedad y nos benefician también a nosotros. Gracias por su tiempo.
Por la excelente presentación y por compartir con la audiencia lo que estás haciendo en el Perú, que es bastante relevante y muy interesante para nuestra sociedad, que realmente necesita ese tipo de iniciativas. Y como mencionaste, se necesita una transformación en la mentalidad universitaria, que es bastante conservadora, y esperemos que los cambios sigan para la mejoría de nuestra sociedad y para darle más oportunidad a los jóvenes y poder desarrollar el tipo de competencias que se necesitan para atacar los problemas sociales. Voy a pasar a hacer un resumen de tu presentación en inglés. Gracias, Eduardo.
Gracias. Susan, estás en mute.
Okay, gracias. So I'm gonna briefly summarize what Professor Modest has mentioned in English. So he started by sharing with with the audience his motivations as a child, that he did not want to work for the for-profit sector, but he wanted to be an agent of change, and decided to join a university. So he started working for the Catholic University in Lima, but through his experience, he has confirmed and discovered that the universities have a very important role to play in social change and have a huge potential, but unfortunately, it's not always maximized. In the case of Peru, is still the university doesn't play the role that they should play in terms of contributing to and focusing on human development. So Professor Ismodes mentioned that it's important to have financial resources, knowledge to promote economic growth, and knowledge and technological change combined with financial resources are very important, and those are elements that universities have to consider. That in the case of Peru, he focused on sharing the example of Peru. Peru has been in an approach of acquiring knowledge and buying technology and not producing it itself, because the universities are not playing the role that they should play. So in Peru, the knowledge is not being created, it's being purchased. And that has pros and cons, which I'm not going to go in detail because of a matter of time. But it's important, he mentioned that it's important to develop the capacity to create your own knowledge that is adapted to the social needs. And universities have a key role to play in this aspect, in this process. Unfortunately, universities now in Peru do not give the incentive to the professor for change. They don't contribute to develop creativity and the entrepreneurial skills that are needed. It's important to contribute. Universities have to play an important role in creating the right mindset for entrepreneurial development. And that creating that right mindset in students will make them agents of change and will impact positively on society. He gave the example of an initiative that is being created by the Catholic University with a collaboration of a university in Colombia called Iquipu, which promotes entrepreneurship, and they have right now 33,000 entrepreneurs that are members of Iquipu, and they have a number of activities which I'm not going to mention, but they are focused on transforming societies with supporting entrepreneurship, creating networks, and supporting also incubators. And they are directed towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. So that being said, I am going to pass on to the Q&A session if there are no additional comments. Yamila, do you have any comments before we go to the Q&A? Okay, I'm just going to go to the Q&A. So to start with, and I, unfortunately, because of time, I will have to limit myself to ask one question per presenter. Sam, I'm going to start with you. So this is a very interesting question. Which three social and student social entrepreneurial competencies do you consider the most relevant in this COVID-19 scenario?
Well, thank you for that question. That is indeed interesting. Certainly has presented some challenges for us connecting with people, but I think persistence and the use of technology are important as well. So I teach a course in neighborhood and community, and one of the assignments is I ask students to reach out to their communities and try to assess what are some of the issues facing their fellow members. And so, my students are coming up with really interesting ideas, but simple ideas to use technology, to use Google Forms and Google Docs to paste or to create flyers and put them in their neighborhoods as a way for folks to access and enter in information that allows people to stay connected, but without necessarily being close to people and still being socially distant. So in terms of the other competencies, though, I think creativity, creativity comes, right, sort of Dr. Howard mentioned, when there's a challenge, we rise to that challenge and we use our creativity. And so I think COVID is presenting a challenge for us to be more creative. So yeah, I would say definitely creativity and leveraging technology for sure.
Thank you, Samuel. Thank you. That's very, very important and relevant for our audience. A question for Professor Howard. Your project in India has caught a lot of attention, and some of the comments say that effectively India is an overpopulated country, and the issue of giving, working in developing more self-confidence in girls is very important. And there's a number of questions that I'm going to summarize. How do you, what do you think are the key remaining challenges of your initiative in India? If you're working in an overpopulated country where, you know, unfortunately, because of the beliefs in society, girls don't have their own decision-making powers. And how are you dealing with the issue of internet connectivity in rural areas in India, and how would you measure impact of your initiative?
So those are several questions, and I think each one I have a full presentation on, but thank you very much, and thank you for your engagement in the presentation. In terms of the challenge, indeed, overpopulation, although in global health, we try not to focus on overpopulation, but rather on the term reproductive health, because there are a lot of political connotations because of the history of India with forced sterilization and a lot of other unfortunate initiatives some 25, 35 years ago. So we really focus on the term reproductive health. And that includes giving girls the information for them to make choices, particularly in the age group 15 to 19, with the idea of addressing early marriage and early childbearing. So in fact, the challenge that we address, I didn't include this in the slides, is in fact in Jaipur, which you mentioned, Susanna, and Rajasthan have the highest rates of early child marriage and adolescent births in the world. So we're really targeting those two states. And indeed, the game is designed to give girls the decision-making power by giving them the skills to negotiate. So we have a huge matrix. In fact, one of the last slides that I hid shows the matrix and how we're measuring, and I believe the slides will be shared so you can see that. But we're looking at, as I said, confidence, relationships, and health as metrics, because your health score may go up, but your confidence may go up in being able to negotiate your choices with your intimate partner, but then your relationship score may go down. So that's the real world. There is no black and white decision. And so we're showing that through the game, and we're showing through the choices the girls game what impact their choices has on their life. So this idea of simulating their choices. So we're actually leveraging game technology to show girls, what happens if they make a decision. In terms of internet connectivity, this game is being made now. It's going to be available and downloadable through the Google Play Store. And I deleted a lot of the slides, but India has the largest adolescent population, and surprisingly, and again, this is as a result of, and perhaps because of COVID, we're seeing more girls and adolescents online, and particularly use of mobile phone, because that's how they go to school. This game does not require internet connectivity. It simply requires access to the Google Play Store. So it's being built on an Android phone. And we get asked the question about the digital divide a lot, but in rural areas, people are using phones for e-commerce. That's how they get paid. That's how they negotiate. That's how they trade. So we're actually seeing an increase in rural areas of cell phone access more than urban areas. And again, there's a lot of data to support that I didn't include in the presentation. But thank you for those. And just to, someone asked about the time. We plan to launch around mid-June, and the grant is for 5 years. The grant ends in 2023. And we plan on applying for another grant in January, this January, for another 5 years. And we're going to add a boy game. And ideally, there's another question about couples. We also hope to do a game for married adolescent couples as well. And this game could go on and on. We could talk about other health issues as well. So we're excited about this. Thank you for the questions.
Thank you, Dr. Howard. That's very relevant because some of the lessons learned and some of the initiatives that you are doing in India could be well applied in Latin America because a few of the countries in the regions face the same issue. So I think it was very valuable for you to share this, your experience and your initiative in India. Thank you. Voy a seguir con una pregunta para Eduardo. ¿Qué desafíos tiene la universidad en Perú y en la región latinoamericana para los próximos años para apoyar el desarrollo emprendedor? ¿Y qué tipo de liderazgo se necesita en las universidades para lograr este objetivo de crear espacios para desarrollar emprendedores? Estás en mute, Eduardo.
Gracias por la pregunta, un poco complicada, porque como decía Josep Burset, un catalán pensador en el tema universitario, él comentaba, ninguna institución cambia por acción de sus miembros, los que están adentro. O sea, hay una especie de acomodo y es muy difícil que eso cambie. Tiene que venir un golpe, una crisis externa, tiene que venir una influencia externa para que la institución cambie. Y en la experiencia que yo tengo, ese cambio tiene que venir en cooperación con los estudiantes. Solo con los profesores no va a funcionar. Con el liderazgo de rectores o de decanos no va a funcionar, porque la gran mayoría está acostumbrada a hacer lo que hace y es elegida para mantener el sistema. Entonces, yo creo que hay, lo que ha comentado Samuel, nos trae ideas de cómo, ideas para incorporar, pero lo vital es cómo decirle a los estudiantes, hoy en día te estamos formando solo en conocimientos y somos muy malos para formarte en competencias. Somos incompetentes para formarte en competencias. Pero tenemos una salida. La universidad es un espacio grande donde promovemos que se formen equipos. Y mi experiencia, cuando se forman equipos de interés al interior de la universidad, es que entre los estudiantes se enseñan, se transmiten, desarrollan esas competencias que los profesores no sabemos enseñar. El gran desafío es cómo abrir las puertas y facilitar estas redes entre estudiantes, conseguir que los profesores se involucren, que gente de fuera de la universidad se involucre con estos equipos universitarios, que gente mayor los acompañe, que les dé mentoría, les dé orientación, porque muchas veces los estudiantes pueden ir sin conocer el mundo exterior y esa gente mayor los puede ayudar. Yo creo que ese es el gran reto e integrarnos. Felicito por este lado a Fiesa. Fiesa es una fiesta de integración entre universidades, donde podemos compartir experiencias, podemos compartir avances y entre todos formar esta red que venga desde abajo, porque desde arriba yo veo muy difícil que suceda.
Gracias, Eduardo. Bastante relevante tu respuesta y efectivamente esa es una gran oportunidad que está dando Fiesa a las universidades de la región y felicito a los coordinadores de esta iniciativa porque realmente en todos los webinarios que han venido desarrollando se han compartido muchas experiencias que es muy válido y que creo que se necesita más en nuestra región. Voy a pasarle el micrófono a Yamila. Gracias.
Muchísimas gracias. Thank you Sam. Thank you Susan. Thank you Susana. Thank you Eduardo. Eduardo, you have just said fiesta de integración. Gracias Eduardo por ese eslogan, lo vamos a tomar, es una fiesta de integración. I will speak in Spanish. Thank you all. Me quedo con todas las competencias que han nombrado a lo largo del panel, que fue muy interesante: negociación, confianza, autoconfianza, comunicación, habilidades comunicacionales, toma de decisiones, creatividad, innovación. Estamos hablando de competencias muy relevantes para desarrollar. Tenemos un rol clave las universidades en ese objetivo de desarrollo emprendedor. Creo que ha sido muy interesante el panel, muy rico. Agradezco a cada una de las experiencias que nos han compartido y a todo el público por la cantidad de preguntas y de saludos y agradecimientos. Simplemente decirles que los esperamos el próximo martes, esta vez en otro horario, a las 12 horas. Vamos a iniciar una horita más tarde con la temática El compromiso de las universidades en relación a los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. No me queda más que saludarlos, agradecer, y nos veremos pronto, seguiremos trabajando en este objetivo. Thank you, Samuel, Susan again, Susana, Eduardo, see you.
Gracias. Chao. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gracias.